Can we go ahead and get,
Barbara? You're on the seat. It's recording now?
all right, I'd like to call to order this work session. The title is Occupy Anchorage. And we can start by going around the table, Ms. Tucker.
Juliet Pepper, Assembly Council.
Harriet Drummond, Assembly, West Anchorage.
Paul Holman, Assembly.
Dick Trainee, Assembly.
Patrick Flood, Assembly. Ernie Hall, Assembly.
W.O.C. Hunter.
Jennifer Johnston.
Chris Birch.
George Michaelis, Municipal Manager.
Dennis Wheeler, Municipal Attorney.
John Rado, Parks and Recreation.
And the police chief will be joining us.
Okay.
We thought it might be appropriate to give you all a rundown on Occupy Anchorage. As you know, it's a national movement, and I know you've seen all of the press related to it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, throughout the country. We have been working with the folks from Occupy Anchorage now for a couple of months. We've had numerous meetings with their representatives. We've also had individual meetings where John and the police chief and our attorney have met with them one-on-one on different issues. To this point, they've been pretty cooperative, and when we've indicated things that needed to be done or changed, they've been very cooperative about doing that. What I thought we might do for you, though, is kind of give you a little rundown as to some of the issues so that you're aware of it. And then to do that, Dennis will probably do it because an awful lot of them are more legal than anything else. But just in a nutshell, I think you realize that initially they started out in a town square, and because of the holiday seasons and everything else that's coming about and how town square is used during the holiday, they have agreed to move their tents and things, and they're down in the park strip now. They do keep a tent here as a warm-up tent for their folks that are basically showing their signs, etc., on a day-to-day basis and also at night. But the bulk of them have been basically staying and residing out of Park Strip. So with that, Dennis?
So I think we've been in contact with them for probably about 3 months now, would be my guess. And in the early stages, there was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Snyder that we met with, who indicated he would be the point of contact for us. In some early phone conversations, it came to be that we wanted to meet, and he wanted to bring an attorney. And we had that meeting, all of us were there. He did bring in an attorney. And we talked about the various different ways to get their activities under a permit of some kind, depending on where they wanted to be. And as George indicated, our preference was the Park Strip. I think they actually expressed the same preference because they were hoping to grow and expand, and the Park Strip would be amenable to that, depending on how many tents and people they could get together. Since that time, our communications with Mr. Snyder and the attorney have essentially dropped off. We're now in communication with the gentleman who identifies himself as Matt.
Yeah, Matt Mall, he testified at the Assembly, one of the individuals in the sidewalk ordinance.
Is he the fellow who said he wanted to run for mayor?
No, that's Brian Dewson, I think.
So, whether over the phone or in-person contacts by myself, John, or the chief, or in the meetings, we continue to ask them and give them suggestions about how to get a permit. And in fact, we shared with them the form. We told them to put together a white paper explaining what they wanted to do and how they might accomplish that. And we explained to them all the public safety concerns we had with the different options. And it came down to issues of the permit fee and insurance, because typically when we issue this, what we call a special activity permit, we require liability insurance to protect the municipality. The permit fee we got to where it was roughly $108 a day, but of course their concern is they want to do this for the foreseeable future, and so the financial burden for them became an issue. And what we suggested and proposed to them, in which they have generally agreed is amenable, is to work that fee off versus paying us in cash. So the concept is that they would work through parks, similar to how we run community service, where they would provide trail watch, cleanup, snow removal, whatever it was that we could come up with to work the fee off. with respect to but we don't have a definitive agreement with them at all at this point. With respect to the insurance issue, more often than not, the insurance requirement is about $1 million. We reduced that to $300,000 and $350,000, somewhere in there. And suggested a number of ways for them to acquire it. We started by looking at whether you can get it on your homeowner's policy, which you can often do if you're holding a wedding reception or a reunion or something like that. There are also online services that provide that kind of insurance. We don't know what efforts they've made. They've said they haven't been able to acquire the insurance. We had heard that the NAACP had actually provided coverage for some groups down in the States, and so we suggested that as an alternative. And it wasn't clear to me whether they had or hadn't contacted them, but it didn't sound like.
Well, I just had a discussion with the NAACP, and they were contacted and went before the board, and the board declined. Offline, I'll tell you exactly what they said. But they declined, and according to the NAACP, they were aware that the group had also gone to ACLU, and the ACLU had also declined.
Ms. Johnson has a question.
Just as a matter of process, the Occupy groups are a community that tends to speak. No one is in charge, is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
So as you were having these discussions, how do you have that constant person, or, how do you know if that constant person is the one that?
The way we're doing it is John and I spend a lot of time talking to them. So we kind of start knowing who the routine folks are that seem to be the leaders based on, the feeling you get from talking to them. We've exchanged phone numbers and email addresses and stuff with some of them. And they generally respond to us when we talk to them. They tell us about the challenges and stuff. And then since they're into the electronic world, they email out or post on their website all their meeting minutes and so forth. And so we read that stuff and follow it. And so we see who's saying what in their minutes and compare notes to see, what are they saying in their meeting and how does that jive with what they tell John and me. So we think we have a fairly good idea on who their stronger players are, and we tried to keep a dialogue going with those folks.
And I guess my follow-up question is, you kind of have the idea of who the stronger players are, but when it comes to signing an agreement or signing a permit, how binding is that, or how,
That's an issue. We met with them again this morning, and one of the suggestions that I had for them was, if this is going to be a long-term thing for them, if they're serious about it, they ought to look at incorporating as a nonprofit. It's according to Glenn Smith, it's one of the hurdles for them in terms of acquiring insurance. If they would get the state license and pull down some boilerplate canned articles of incorporation, they could at least get started, and we would have some identified contacts. From what we've seen from their meeting minutes, they do things by consensus. There is no real hierarchy, and consensus really is not even a vote tally from what little I've seen, and I don't know if you've seen anything more than that. So it's not even really clear how they know they've reached a decision on any particular strategy sometimes.
I think it's the hand sign thing.
I've attended just on the perimeter just to kind of watch one of these things, and basically it's a circle, and they have verbal rules, and they establish the rules at the outset as to what you can say and what you can do and how you acknowledge and how you pro, con, whatever, and it's hand signals is basically what it is. I'll give you an off-cuff kind of a example of the difference in the way these people operate, but it is General Assembly is what they call themselves. And if they like something, if you recall, there were 20 plus of at the assembly meeting about the sidewalk ordinance. You reminded them no clapping a few times. If you looked amongst their group, the way they applaud each other and they acknowledge something that is, this is applauding, okay? So just to put it in context, that's how they do business amongst each other in this big circle. They have their certain hand signals, but ultimately the consensus is out of General Assembly, and then somebody, in this particular case, we're dealing with one individual more than others, they become the conduit for our information. But it's not necessarily the only person. We had a new player today, for example, that we had not seen. And the original individual, Mr. Snyder, for health reasons or other, it's kind of just drifted away over the last month. But, you know, it comes out of General Assembly, a consensus, and then out of that, Mark and I, as you said, we're in contact with them, so we try to make sure we know who the contacts are.
I actually
I
say
guess-
that they wonder as much about what we're going to do as we wonder about what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And if you read their minutes, you can see that they think that the mayor and I are in disagreement over what to do about them. I don't know how they got that notion, because I'm not sure that you even had those discussions yet. But
You guys doing this with each other or what?
I don't know, but they believe that, you know, that we're not in agreement on how to handle these guys.
So just to follow up quickly with that, I guess this wouldn't work since they call themselves an assembly, but to me it sounds like it's a group of individuals, and can we do something looking at them as an individual versus an assembly? Just, I mean, to get around some of these issues.
Well,
We're
that's one of
trying.
the things that Dennis was mentioning just earlier, because that is one of the issues. That is one of the issues.
Okay, Mr. Birch has been waiting.
Is any of the leadership from Alaska, or have you been able to determine the area residents? Because I had heard that there's, you know, like an organizing group or some number of folks that come up from, you know.
There's both.
Both?
Matt,
Okay.
Matt is from out of state. Christina is from Juneau.
We've got 4 people in line, and we still haven't heard the main problems yet, so.
Well, that was what my.
We have local and out of state.
Local and outside, and as a follow-up, is there a mission or objective? I mean, is there like, oh, when this happens, you know, when the city government finally cuts its budget by 20%, then we'll leave, or?
So we've been trying to monitor both what's going on at the national and the local level, and not only myself, but Mew staff and Todd Sherwood, the assistant school attorney. What we see are a couple of things. One, there are some in their group that prefer not to have a set point of platform goals, that's antithetical to their purpose. Some find that they're spending so much time trying to occupy space and find resources to do that they haven't really gone beyond that to develop a platform. The local group has certainly planned to do some marches. For example, they did the march down to the Fifth Avenue Mall here not too long ago, and they've talked about doing a couple other things that we'll touch on. So they do have some defined events, and certainly they'd like to grow the encampment. But as far as an end game, in terms of what would satisfy them or not, no idea where that will end up.
Mr. Honeman, and then maybe we could get quick a summary and then answer our questions.
Well, and I can wait for the summer if you'd like, but I do know I've been hearing on the national movement about the attempt to shut down port or blockade port across the country as a movement, I believe Monday.
Certainly on the West Coast, and they're planning to do a march here
Monday,
to go.
they did close the port.
I think 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock p.m.
1 o'clock meeting at
Their
Town
plan is
Square.
to meet at Town Square and walk down to at least the
It'll work.
railroad station. We've told them that it's problematic from there because there's not identified sidewalks, there's a lot of snow berming, and would be a hazard, create conflicts between the truck traffic and pedestrians. And so they've been given that message. They indicated, at least the 2 gentlemen we met with, that they're not interested in trying to create any sort of conflict along those lines.
And then the general comment I have on that, on the issue overall is long as, from my view, and again, I'm no lawyer and certainly past law enforcement, but from my view, an individual citizen's right to First Amendment, free speech and all that kind of thing, I don't know that we want to even go to the point of starting to tamper with that issue of requiring permits from individuals or worrying about the insurance part of it. I think as it develops a structure or a chain of command or some sort of thing, I think that's where we should be prepared for those kind of levels. But I think realistically, with a bunch of individuals we've got, as long as we keep a dialogue, we won't be faced with something like they've been faced in some of these California universities or San Francisco the other day, New York City. I just don't see that as a rising problem here. But if it becomes such, I think we need to be prepared to plan. That's just my thought.
Okay, Maybe we could hear from Mr. Trini, and then you could tell us what the main problems are and what you're thinking, and then we could respond. Would that be okay, Mr. Trini?
Just from my point of view, the port is a life safety issue, much like our water, because we're dependent upon a 3-day supply of food supplies going over 48. It's unacceptable to block the port. End of story.
We have had several meetings on how to deal with that situation, and we do not foresee, even if the situation arises to the point more than what we anticipate, where the port is going to be hampered in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sir. Whoever's doing this.
All right,
Dennis?
so the primary issue from the legal perspective is you want to make sure that you have consistency in how you enforce your codes. And what would get you into trouble in terms of that is if you enforce your codes or don't enforce your codes because of the message of the particular group involved. Because then you start getting into issues of whether or not you are or are not discriminating against any particular group. So we know that they are violating park rules because they're camping, because they're in the park after the closed hours. We have tried for the 3 months now to get them under a permit, and we are nearing the time where we've explored every option and resolved every option. And if we don't have a permit at that point, then what is the next step? And what we're trying to do is make sure that we approach that in a way that isn't going to create an allegation that we've discriminated for or against this group because of the message. But we are concerned about being consistent, because any other group, whether they have something to say or just want to use the space, is going to be asking us, well, what are the requirements? When do you make exceptions? How do you enforce? Why us? Why not them? So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to balance. And what we've been doing is really tracking what's going on in all the other jurisdictions to see what they're doing and see what sort of arguments are being made in court and so on, so we can try to avoid the pitfalls that they may run into.
Do you want questions now, or do you want to continue? You're going to spark questions no
Sure.
matter what.
Maybe a separate, a piece of what Dennis just touched on, and similar to the question you talked about, foregoing a permit for the time being. We're already receiving phone calls because the general public sees an activity on the park strip. They know it's not permitted, it's not allowed by code. And so other individuals now call and say, well, can we go build an igloo compound on the park strip? Do we need a permit? Can we stay in it? The precedent aspect of other groups, message or not, or who they are, has me a bit concerned the longer this goes. The permit would be the proper way for us, and that way it's a fair application to the general public. What the stipulations and conditions might be, they're always different, but in this particular case, we've gone a while now with them on the park strip. We've reached that juncture, I think, we're getting close.
Mr. Honeman has a question.
Comment and question, but Dennis, you and I work together on abatements from communities on nuisances for lots of things. And so what strikes me is the First Amendment, exercising the First Amendment, your rights, obviously being the stated intent by this lack of organization. And the concern is that certainly we could require permitting, and certainly under permitting we could place requirements, things they can and cannot do. We can regulate a permit. What I believe we have a problem with, in my opinion, is that tying that to a fee. And much like when they did the nuisance abatements, the community could get together, 20 or 30 of them, and file a claim against the property owner for all these abatement issues. And if they lose the suit, they can claim community interest group, and they don't have that liability. They have no, at least the courts have recognized a right to say we waive any court fees or fines if you were to lose that suit. So I think we need to look at, perhaps, if we're going to require a permit, which I think we should, and I do believe we should regulate activities such as trespassing and noise ordinances, and littering, and anything that they can and cannot build on that site that they're in. But I don't believe that we should be so stringent and concerned about the fees, if you will, for the permit. And maybe even perhaps the insurance, if perhaps they were to sign some liability waiver. When we do ride-alongs with the police department, and we have people sign a form, not sure how concerning or how valid that might be, but they sign away saying, we recognize riding in a police car could be hazardous, and you're signing away a liability. So I just think we need to be very careful and very deliberate in our planning, and I think that this is a great dialogue, so that's my comment.
Anybody else in the queue?
So, one thing that we were working on is, if it comes to be that we can't get them under a permit, and if it comes to be that we decide enforcement is necessary, to kind of walk through how that would work. You've seen at first some cities came in fairly quickly and created a lot of bad press, either because there was a violent reaction or because the police were seen as being overly aggressive, or in one case, pepper spraying a line of students, where maybe a less forceful method would have worked. So we've noticed that some jurisdictions, what they do is they go out and canvass these folks in the park, hand out a pamphlet before they come in and say the park's now closed, you need to be gone. So we've developed one. It's a draft form, but I thought I'd share it with you guys. You can look at it and see what you think. Certainly open to any comments that you might have. The idea is to sort of lay out, here are our codes, here's how it works, here's why we enforce, and we actually included a couple little snippets out of the U.S. Supreme Court that says, sleeping by itself isn't quote-unquote protected speech, those sort of things. So we can kind of lay the framework. And if we were to post these camps as we would other illegal camps, as you may recall, the ordinance provides for either a 3-day notice if we store their goods, or a 15-day notice if we don't want to store their goods. But of course, now that we have the Porcupine facility available to us for storage, the 3-day is a more viable option. In the past, we didn't really have that available to us. So that's one approach. Sometimes cities have gone out and said, okay, you need to be gone by midnight on X day, and they come back, and when people are or not gone. One of the problems with doing that is it tends to, at least in my mind, what I've seen tends to embolden the group to make sure they have as many people there at that moment so they can create an event or a conflict. So it may be that we simply say, as of a certain date, you need to be gone, whether we enforce the next day or 3 days later or 5 days later, we won't necessarily say. Hopefully, though, we'll get them under a permit, and this will be a non-issue.
Have,
You need to sort of permit, they're working off the fees. We had the cleanest sidewalks around the park strip in years.
Potentially.
I mean, it's down to the concrete, all in all.
We need help melting all that ice. Let them sit.
So again, this is a draft. I've stamped it draft. I don't care if it goes out to people. It's just not a confidential document. It's just a way to touch base with people and say, here are the ground rules under which we operate.
have any of the other cities or communities been able to get permits?
I'm not aware, well, I guess if they get a permit, there isn't a conflict at that point. So the ones that catch the headlines are the ones where there's not a permit. They go,
Right.
We
So-
do understand though, don't we, that there's been at least 1 or 2 places where they've had the same insurance requirements and somebody has sponsored.
I've got an article from Tennessee, for example, and the state is now moved to say you need liability insurance and you need a permit. The same thing's happening in Wisconsin. Remember where the Capitol was occupied last year. And they're really, the courts don't seem to have really decided yet on that issue. But from what we've read, by and large, the groups have just gone in and set up, and for a time they took kind of a hands-off. Boston is the latest one to be in the news, where the mayor was very supportive, but now it's become a health and safety issue. The protesters are pushing back. A judge just signed an order that said you have your First Amendment rights, but that does not include occupying this land. And that's went out there, and now the police can go in and enforce. So it seems to be kind of a gray area in most communities.
But I just was wondering if any of the smaller communities have been able to effectively come up with some kind of agreement, or if because it's a nationally charged issue, no one's been able yet to do a permit.
I think we're one of the smallest communities to have in Fairbanks, to have an Occupy movement, so I haven't seen that.
I can tell you that the chief in Duluth is having the same experience we're having here. He's trying to get along with this group, trying to get them legal, whatever that means in Duluth. They may have different local ordinances that require different things to use their parks, but they're going through the same thing we are, and they're challenged by the kind of amorphous nature of the group, but they've managed to keep out of trouble so far.
Urge them to occupy
They do have their own internal rules of conduct. They recently severed their ties with Mr. Martin, for instance, because he will not swear allegiance to their oath. They've contacted our...
So there's an oath?
They have an oath?
Yeah, they have a little oath.
Oh, wow, what's the
And,
oath?
This kind of sounds like the assembly, actually.
And they've contacted our intelligence unit in the last day and said there are 2 anarchist types from out of state that have arrived, and they're not comfortable having these guys around, and so they're helping us work that angle. So they have factions within their group that have different tolerance levels for cooperating and pushing the envelope. They are very aware that that if they're infiltrated, it only takes 1 or 2 people to not stay with the program, and some demonstration that most folks want to go this way suddenly goes that way. And most of them seem comfortable in trying to police that within their group. If they get the permit, what they've agreed to do is have a perimeter, they own that, they can welcome people to join them, but if they have people that they don't like, they think are trouble, they have the authority then to 86 them from their area, and they will call us, and we'll go out there and we'll trespass them or whatever. They've agreed to sanitation and to work off their fees and all that. The only thing we're hung up on right now really is the insurance piece.
I know it's 1 o'clock, Madam Chair, that's why
I guess my biggest quandary over this is, what do we do with legal identifiable organizations? If this was the Boy Scouts, or if it was Fur Rondi, or if it was a Lions Club doing this, how would we handle that? I mean, are you setting a precedent where this year Fur Rondi comes in and says, we're really tight on money, we'd like to work our fees off rather than pay them?
That's exactly this issue we've been struggling with. Now, Mr. Horniman mentioned earlier, maybe we do need to be more flexible when there's a clear First Amendment effort here. Because certainly you don't want to run into an argument where somebody says, all these barriers in terms of permit requirements, insurance, et cetera, make it hard for my little group to get out, put out our word for or against some idea. And it's not necessarily a community event like for Rondi or maybe the governor's picnic where there's necessarily a message to be made. If you were to create a structure where you could consistently find a way to waive or reduce permits, you're going to have to figure out how to structure that to make sure you don't run into unfair treatment.
And I guess one of the things that you just said to me is kind of interesting. When we got this group there, and all of a sudden somebody inside the group, they don't want to be there any further, we'll go remove that individual. How is it that we're not violating their rights as opposed to the group that suddenly says, we don't want that person to be here anymore?
That's the problem when you don't have a true group and a true hierarchy in terms of who can speak for the group.
Or a permit.
Yeah, or a permit.
See, if they had the permit, then they're permitted for that area, and they're in control of that area, and if they have...
But if they're in the right-of-way over here where they are at Town Square, then they can't throw somebody off the sidewalk. We just have to wade in there and enforce laws. Now, their internal rules tell them that if somebody's getting out of hand, they make a circle around them and they point at them and say, peace, 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 or something like that, and make enough rackets that we see that, and then we can go in and take care of that person. They kind of corral them, but...
It seems to me that's putting us in a real catch-22.
Paul, another way to kind of, for lack of a better term, identify the players if you want, it goes back to that ride-along waiver. Part of the permit requirement might be that any individual on that space or in that space must sign a waiver of liability. And now you have a name identified with that, and then they must abide by the rules of the permit. The permits may have some strict requirements, no violation of laws such as littering, trespassing, I mean, I think you could really hone this in and make it less onerous as far as the money wise, and really get down to limiting what they can and can't do.
Well, the permits that we issue do have all kinds of restrictions.
Sure, but you could refine this if they're gonna get a waiver, is what I'm getting at. You could actually make, in lieu of the money, we require certain things. You sign this waiver, and along with that waiver comes along some conditions, some tighter conditions.
Yeah, the risk there is that there's so many people that come in and out of that group at any given time. It'll be the person that hasn't signed the waiver that'll get hurt probably. Something.
That's Murphy law, right?
Yeah.
So, the picnic area down along the coastal trails, many different, not coastal, I can't think of the name of the park.
Elderberry, Valley of the Moon Park?
Valley of the Moon, Elderberry Park?
Yeah, Valley of the Moon Park, all of these picnic areas, and people go down and have picnics. I mean, you see families, you see, and some permanent, some not, otherwise it's just a gathering. What's the liability of the municipality for those type of gatherings with insurance? I mean, I understand why we need to look at insurance, because once you have a permitting, you're recognizing a group. I just was wondering, I'm just looking for ways to get around this insurance aspect.
Just the general activities in the park fall under our self-insurance program. The excess carrier kicks in at $2 million. So if somebody makes a claim, then risk management looks at that and decides whether or not we have liability. Did we fail to maintain park property appropriately, or allow some event that we shouldn't have? That's really what
I'm just, kind of going back to this, a bunch of individuals, I'm not,
Right, so our original thought was that this group comes down there, and remember when it first got started, there was this issue with them trying to get themselves arrested and trading overtime, people getting hurt, and then later you had a couple of people die in the camps and so on. So we were very much concerned about how the liability would play out.
Right.
And in addition to that, we wanted to be uniform in our application. We typically require the liability insurance, so we weren't trying to make an exception for them. We wanted to treat them as any other group that would come in and ask to exclusively control the space under a permit.
Chris?
But, so far, they've been very cooperative. They're very, very small. They're over in the park strip where there aren't a lot of facilities to get hurt with or by.
Right.
In talking to Glenn, the risk is probably now lower than it has been.
I guess that's kind of my follow-up question.
Yeah, and presuming they continue to do pretty much just what they're doing, the exposure is very, very low. But if they start to grow and want to do these marches like they're planning on Monday and so on, then maybe it changes a little bit.
Chris? We've all gone camping, and there's facility requirements when you go camping. And I guess when I think of Occupy, are they physically? I mean, do you have people that are there 24/7? So, I mean, they're doing camp stoves, and what are they doing for latrines? What are they doing for shelter?
They have arrangement with the church for the use of the facilities.
Okay, so basically they've got an adjoining church that's providing the restroom facilities, and then they're basically sleeping, tenting, camping, or whatever.
When they were over here at Town Square more prominently, they had plugged into the electricity when the trees were energized, the power for the trees was energized, and they had heaters, and people were bringing food, and
They had hot plates, coffee pot, they had a flat screen TV. at one
Really?
point.
Let's go on.
Well, part of what they do is they do this live video streaming as well. Mark's been through it, and so have I. When you approach them, if you watch closely, somebody's got you on camera.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, they'll do what's happening around the country is they do something called doxing, particularly if they don't like you. And you've read about this hacking outfit called Anonymous. They got in trouble with the Mexican cartels, and they've hacked into the Pentagon or something. I can't remember now what all they've done. Well, these people are around the world, and they watch all these live stream things, and so they'll flash your name tag, and say, this is the chief. They put your business cards up there, and if they don't, and they go through down the line, filming all the police officers and their names and all that, and if they don't like you, they say, dox this guy, he's the leader, his name's Mew, he's doxing. And all these hackers are now online trying to crack into your home email, your daughter's Facebook, your bank account, and they've jammed up some cops and federal agents around the country already badly, disrupted their lives. They've already published all my phone numbers and addresses and the mayor's phone numbers and addresses and email contacts. I get stuff from the Netherlands. And fortunately, what they're saying on their live stream is, you know, the cops are cool here, the cops are cool. I mean, they have people saying, we're going to come up from Seattle, we're going to kick their, you know, up, and they say, no, these cops are cool, these cops are cool. So right now, it's kind of okay, but if this gets confrontational, you can expect that kind of reaction from some of the people that are in there.
Isn't that a, I mean, you can't ask other people to do that to someone else, can you? Is that, I mean, is there a legal, I mean, it seems like it's almost harassment or intimidation.
Oh, it is.
Or, I mean.
But they're anonymous. So-
Huh?
But they're anonymous.
It's kind of like WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Patrick? I just appreciate your measured and thoughtful approach to this. I know it's a tricky challenge.
Well,
Like you're
you know,
doing.
we decided 6 weeks ago that there's something, you know, keep your friends close, your enemies closer. You know, we've been working really hard to be right with these guys all the time and chatting them up. And John and I stop on our days off. I ride my bike there, and they love my bike, you know. So, you know, we really do try and develop some sort of a rapport with them, because one of these days, when it gets ugly, I think it's good that we've got some trust.
And as I mentioned earlier, they have been responsive to most of our requests. And John and I walked over, they cut that power cords off the sidewalk. And
They were
took down our
shoveling snow in the
signs.
park over here about an hour ago.
Okay.
We hadn't even talked to them, they're out there shoveling stuff, shoveling the walks over by the pack.
Paul?
I just wanted to, I'm not trying to be an obstructionist to trying to create order and regulation and rule. I firmly believe that there should be a permit. I firmly believe we should have some very strict requirements. And I support that, and I echo what Mr. Flynn said, that you're thinking of it and you're trying to be ahead of the game is actually a real good idea. I just do believe that the value of what you stated, Mr. Chief, is that we gain more by doing it right than to try to take the posture that, hey, look, we're not tolerating, you know, the zero tolerance effect in some cases. And I know we've been more than patient already. I get that.
Well, and that's why we're trying to lay the groundwork to show that we've done everything we can. You know, we've given them a very long time frame to try to get permits in place.
I
We're trying to
believe-
meet with them whenever we can, whether formally with George or informally when these guys stop by. And things like this, we're giving lots of notice
This is
about
great.
what's required, so that at the end of the day, if enforcement action is ultimately needed, we've done everything we can to avoid criticism that we've acted hastily or unfairly.
What he was saying too, the chief was saying, you know, having somebody contact you and say, hey, there's a couple troublemakers up here, and we don't really want them in our midst. I mean, that's positive. I don't know that too many departments have that rapport, and I think that's.
Right now, things are going good. I just wish we could get them legal.
Have,
Jennifer?
you should ask this, but have any of the churches stepped forward as far as insurance or?
Nobody will touch this crowd. They've looked around the country and seen what's happened in other cities. Nobody wants to take that on.
You know, yeah, if there's an overdose in a camp, does the family sue the church because of what? You know, how does that gonna play out? Somebody's beaten or cars are broken, vandalizing this.
I should say, one other thing we haven't mentioned, but I should put it out there, is they will, at some point, want to get arrested. And they've told us that, and they've talked to us about the rules of engagement and what likely will happen, how to get arrested without committing a felony, without things going violent. So we've been having discussions with them along that. What they're gonna do one of these days is go do a sit-in in front of a bank and prevent people from coming and going. And it'd be like the abortion protests were back in the 90s, and we'll have an operation like that. And we're working, we won't be able to stop them from doing that, but I think we will be able to steer this so that they get their 5 minutes in front of the news cameras, and then we'll take them around the corner and cite them and let them go, trying to do something like that. They are planning on testifying tonight at the Shell hearings at the Lusac Library. They said they're not planning on getting arrested or being disruptive. They're going to have some signs and they'll testify just like they have been at the assembly. There's a thing on Monday doesn't sound to me like they intend to get arrested or to do anything, then just try and get some media attention. But
They'll be there at your next meeting to talk about the sidewalk.
How many people are we talking
Listen
about?
in.
Do you have a sense?
they got 40 together when they did their thing at the mall. So they do have the potential of getting folks who aren't willing to camp overnight with them and spend a whole lot of time with them to come out. A lot of the people that helped with that and joined them for that day looked like normal folks like us. That didn't say that right, but give what it is. But whether those people come out and march the port, I don't know. I asked them that question this morning. I said, is it going to be 12 people or 50 people? And they frankly, they're clueless. They don't know how many will show up.
I did think when I saw the coverage of the ball thing, someone who looked a lot like George in the group.
Yeah, I have a twin out there.
According to their latest notes from the 5th of December, there were 12 people at that General Assembly meeting. And they expressed some concern about morale and just having enough people to maintain a presence at both places. And apparently some people don't feel safe on the park strip and things have been stolen. So they're going through a lot of the normal things that I guess a new organization goes through when they're trying to do something like this.
Well,
You go ahead, you're doing great.
I've been sitting and this is an awful lot to digest, I'll tell you. But I'll come back to the comment that Paul made about doing it right. And I guess I really question, is that what we're doing? I would equate this to we just jumped off of the Empire State Building and at every floor somebody hears to say, so far so good. But sooner or later we're going to get to the bottom of the building. If we've ever had anybody in the park that we've got potential and real problem that we're going to need some insurance over, it's probably this group. I mean,
we probably have, well, John can speak to this, but I would say anytime we have alcohol in the park, it's probably a bigger problem. That can be done under a permit.
Yeah.
So far, these guys have only suffered things like theft against them, and really they haven't caused us any real trouble. So it could become a concern, but so far, like you say,
I guess my
falling
concern,
down the floors,
I guess my concern isn't somebody with alcohol. It's going to be somebody that, I'll use the term a good old boy, that gets in there and suddenly gets in their face and somebody gets hurt.
That was my concern, and I expressed this to these guys. It's not necessarily them. It's some jerk out there that comes on board.
And they know that. We've told them at the very beginning that one of the advantages of having the permit is the notion that they have exclusive use. So if they have any trouble at all, they call APD. APD removes that person.
Right.
It protects them more than anything else.
And you've already established with us that we're really dealing with this, we're concerned about it being First Amendment rights. Yet they don't appear to have an issue with that. If they've got someone that's a problem, they've got just as much right to be in that public space as they do, yet they have them expelled and we expel them for them.
If they had the permit, we would do that. But right now, if somebody walked in the middle of their camp and just stood there and said everything contrary to Occupy, they could do that.
I don't know, my concern is, like I say, I think, I have no qualm about you've really been trying to do this right, but how long do we try to do it right before we get into trouble? And
That's a tough question.
if we have an individual that goes out there and they get injured because of these people, you see the lawsuit, the city's responsible. We have the liability to provide a safe environment for people to be in. And it is not comfortable out there walking through and being around.
If the facts change, it may force a decision. Let's say, for example, they were in an area where it was more wooded, and they started cutting down trees to stoke and open campfire. Different situation. Now we've got a problem. There's permanent damage being done. Those sorts of things may change how we respond.
Sounds fluid.
Yeah.
Mr. Honeman.
Last comment, I know we're over, so I just, we talk about, and I know you made a comment, that didn't necessarily sound right, but I have actually spoken to many members of this community who I would never have thought, nor did I have a dialogue opening the question. just comment, spontaneously. People with teenagers and young adults who speak with pride about their young members of their family, who discuss openly with their family members that they go to this, it used to be the weekends, I guess. I personally haven't assimilated when they were doing any protesting like that. I just had to go here. But I've actually spoken to people in our community, people that I, again, respect and hold great conversations with, and they speak with pride about their people, their family members going out and standing up for something and protesting and exercising the First Amendment right. And so I'm very comfortable talking to any of these folks. Admittedly, do I go out and hang out in town square and have a bowl of soup with them and watch their big screen? No. But when they come to the assembly and they're talking, we have conversations, and I hear some, listen to their concerns, and I think that's the thing here. The key is that these are people with concerns that have issues, and they're no different than any other citizen that walks amongst our city. I mean, it really isn't. I view it as we need to be very careful, and I think that you're trying to be that way. And I suspect that might be favorable to the municipality if there ever were a challenge to say, hey, we've had these dialogues and we've had these conversations and we've been very cautious, and for lack of a better term, we've been very conservative in our approach of trying to impede their ability to do things as a citizen. And I think that's what we're doing.
Mr. Drummond, do you have any comments?
I have one
Mr.
last comment. If I
Trainer?
if
Well-
I mean, after everybody else.
I'm sorry, do you want to do it before we go around?
I'll just throw this out there. We've had a lot of contact with the mayor's office, as you might imagine, for and against, and I've had calls, and what I would say, what concerns me most about the calls I have received is the ones from the media, where they say things like, after we give them a 10-minute explanation of all the things we're trying to do, they will say, well, so really the municipality's not doing anything, are you? No, let's back up and start over. Here's what we've been doing. And I think it's because they would love to have a story.
Sure they will.
And so when we hear from the media or we see a news story, we really got to put our filters on and make sure we go back to the source and make sure we get the straight scoop, because I think they would like nothing more than a confrontation.
We're all familiar with media
Yeah.
contact, so. Mr. Trainee, you want to say anything? Ernie, you want to say anything else?
I guess my frustration is this, is we have a real process in place for individuals that want to do anything they want to do. They organize, they form an entity that accepts responsibility, they get permits, they provide insurance, yet we've got this one group that we're kind of letting do kind of just whatever they really want to do, because we're not comfortable really confronting this. And I'm not saying that we're wrong in what we're doing. I'm just saying, it comes to some point where there's the right of the individual or the right of the people. And there's a lot of organizations that are use our parks, all of our public facilities, and they do it by the rules that we lay out. Yet we've got this group that's not going by any of the rules, and yet they still manage to be there. That's my concern.
Right. This is super good. I think this is great, and urge you to continue on that track. So far, I'm totally with you. You sounds like you're doing just what I'm hoping you're doing. The fluidity of it is of some concern, and I'm glad that you're thinking about potential actions here. If there is any dramatic change, we would really like to be notified ASAP, because folks will ask us about what you do, and we'd like to have a good understanding so we can articulate it fairly. All right? Other than that, I have no comment. Jennifer?
I did owe Debbie one other thing, and I sent it to John today, and I will send it to all of you, because I forgot who I sent it to. But there was an article about a plenary session with the Republican Governors Association, and it was an excellent, being Republican or Democrat, this session was on what voice do you use when you're discussing Occupy group, and how do you, what words work with the media and what doesn't, just to get beyond this point that you were saying. And I thought that they brought up some really good points, and I'll share with all of you.
Now, this would be a good thing to share with the media.
Well, we want to make sure everybody has a chance to read it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
easy for me to read it and like it, but
Okay. Well, maybe
whether it
keep
makes
it
sense
out,
to
yeah.
everybody else, you guys can,
Right. Chris?
before we use it.
Any comments?
This is very helpful. Thank you. This is, it's good background, and as others have indicated, it is helpful to kind of know, because people ping on you. I mean, you go to a breakfast meeting or something, somebody says, what's up with that? So so you can, it is nice to have the information. I appreciate the opportunity to.
And they ping on us too.
Oh, yeah, no, it's, yeah, people call up, what's going on?
George, any comment?
Other than the fact, you know, we've been working this collectively and individually, and I agree, you know, if it looks like it's gonna get elevated, we certainly will let you know. But right now, and Ernie, I agree with you 100%. That's the dilemma we've been dealing with, okay? But, you know, I think sometimes, you know, you err in the, you know, for caution. And we still have the wherewithal to do everything we have to do to make it right, you know what I mean? It's just.
I
we're just
absolutely don't
watching.
disagree.
I can tell you that we're trained up in mobile field force. We've dusted off, we've written tactical plans, we're training, we're doing a lot of things behind the scenes. We may end up getting put in a position where it's required that we use some force to control these people. But what we're trying very hard to do is to make sure we don't get baited into something and get used as a tool. And finding where that line is difficult for us, but that's what we're working on. Because if this goes bad, I'll tell you, furball will look like amateur hour compared to what we're going to have. And I don't want to go down that road unless there's no other alternatives.
Johnny and Paul, you're having a conversation. Do you have anything you want to
No, I
share?
just, if you don't mind, if there's no objection, we'd like, I think everything looks good first blush, but adding municipal assembly as well, there's a tag with.
I certainly can, but if you guys have a chance to look at it.
I'm just saying, it's just a proposal.
The other thing is, this is still draft. We haven't.
Yeah.
we
Why
haven't listed
don't
it.
you read it thoroughly and funnel emails through George on any comments, and then we can talk about that later.
Very good.
If somebody has some big objection, they might want to not, but I don't know. All right, Dennis, anything else you want to say? John?
No, I think Mark and I are pretty much in alignment of just maintaining communication with these people. You know, his officers, you know, I just do it on a casual basis, infrequent. Mark's doing the same thing. So far, I think it's helped a lot
Okay.
from both internal communications, us sharing with everybody else, and I think there's somewhat of a comfort, at least at this stage, between the individuals we talk to. So there's always a potential, we understand that, but we've tried to keep it a low flame.
Okay. Julia, you have a comment?
I do. Well, I have one follow-up question for Chief Mew, and that is that if, in the best case scenario, they're recognized, the things that you went over today, that they are a group, they are there, you don't want to get baited, they're not that big, they, you know, seem to be doing these things, you'd like to see them under some kind of a permit to actually assist there. But with that business about the potential for the sit-in and the orchestration of the, what was a bank, the sit-in arrest, is that sort of, I mean, I guess I'd like to know what the vision you have if everything went the best it could under the, you know, less than perfect circumstances we had. Would it be kind of an orchestrated sit-in and then the arrest and kind of
Well, how it
thing
worked with-
without a big flare-up that led up to that, or how what would that look like? So that,
This is what it looks like, and then we've been through this with the abortion protesters. Whether or not they give us advance warning or not, they show up, 30 of them show up, they sit down in front of the bank, they won't leave, they can't open the doors, customers can't get in, employees can't get out. Manager calls the police department, we go out there, and we give them a trespass warning. Say, okay, the manager's told us he wants you to leave, or maybe we make the manager say it. You got 5 minutes to leave, okay, nobody leaves, okay, we're gonna have to arrest you for trespassing. So at that point, they've got a decision. Are they gonna stand up and be led away, or are they gonna passively resist? Then if they passively resist, what we've done in the past is we usually use the SWAT team to do this. We just pick them up, put them on stretchers, and haul them to the buses. And frankly, that's all they want to do is get filmed by the news doing that, and then they get up on their own and get up on the bus because they don't want to fall down and break their back any more than we do. It's more of a stunt than anything else. And in the past, then we arrest each one of them. We drive the bus, in the past, we've driven the bus over to the courthouse and set up an assembly line, mass arraignment, mass processing assembly line over the court. This time, what we're thinking we'll probably do is just take them someplace that we'll have set up and maybe just issue a misdemeanor cites, let them go that way, and kind of slow that whole thing down.
Then would your preference be, and I don't want to be putting words in that, I just am trying to clarify, would your preference be that there not be some kind of big flare-up
Well, of course,
in
that's-
advance of that, so that somehow there's a way that the course is run to that picture that you see at the end, and then once they get through that, then we have to figure out how to manage the after that. But we're still sort of in the before stage.
Well,
But
they have-
that's what I'm getting from what you're saying. I just don't know if I'm right about that.
The whole thing is, if we can keep the dialogue going, and if they tell us what their intentions are, then we can be ready for that and keep our responses well thought out and well planned. What my worst case scenario is they get some folks in their group that break bad, that don't intend to follow the rules, and they fight back when we try and make the arrest, and then we're in a situation where we got a scuffle, we're tasering somebody, we're sprinting somebody with OC, we're hitting somebody with a baton. Then if everybody gets excited and they all jump up, then we got a riot on our hands. And even the people who were intending to comply and they just want their publicity now get excited and they overreact, they change their mind about what they're going to do, and they start doing this stuff here where they do flash mobbing. They're hitting their thing saying the cops are killing us, get out here, and suddenly 5,000 people that are more or less kind of sympathetic, start showing up, and this whole thing mushrooms. That's what we don't want to get in.
Okay, then going back to.
We're running out of time, so we could just.
I just have one more question. In using Ernie Hall's scenario about the person dropping down at each floor, they're doing fine, is there something that you think that the municipality could do that would avoid even the sit-down? Is there any peremptory thing that you think that the city could do in advance of what you foresee as the sit-down Wall Street abortion clinic thing that would obviate it? Or is what you're seeing that the smoothest course to get to that is the better, because that's a peaceful sit-down and arrest demonstration?
Let me just interject and just give you an example. We've known about them going down to the port, okay? And we've also war gamed different scenarios. And one way that has worked so far is John and others have talked to these folks and said, if you guys, are planning on going down to the port, here's some of the things you need to consider. And the way we've approached it with them is, we're really looking out for your safety. And we want you on the sidewalks. We don't want you in the roads. So here's a safe route that you can take. However, once you get down there, it's not very safe to go here and there. And so right now, we've got a consensus, so to speak, that that's what they'll do. So, if in fact we know in advance that they plan on sitting down at the bank or something else, we can also approach it in that light. But as far as stopping them from doing it, we probably won't be able to do that. But we probably will be able to convince them to do it in a safer manner and then explain to them what the consequences might be. That's the best we can do. And it's like being in the military. You can plan for every damn contingency in the world, but the bottom line is you got to rely on the people on the ground to make the right decision at the right time.
I think that if we give them ultimatums or try and get court orders to stop them from doing certain things, they'll just shut down communication with us and they'll do it anyway. Then we'll be reacting to something that's already got momentum.
Very good.
I'd rather be on the front end.
Appreciate that. With that, our time is up. Thank you.